Chapter 1851. Not giving them a single copper. 8. Furthermore, she missed Qi Su. Seeing Mu Shuexin without any reaction, Lu Yu immediately clenched her teeth. Princess, in my opinion, I can see that her relationship with Qi Su is quite special. Special. Obviously it's special. She was Qi Ling's master and even helped Qi Ling cultivate. Would their relationship be ordinary? Mu Shuexin frowned and her expression sank. What are you trying to say? Princess, you have a marriage agreement with the Qi family's second young master, but now he has another woman with him. How could you possibly tolerate his actions? I feel that Qi Su likes that woman very much. Mu Shuexin's expression became even more unsightly. Of course, it was directed against Lu Yu and not young Luo Feng. Eldest young Miss Lu, aren't you meddling too much? I think it doesn't concern you who is with Qi Su. Or it's because you're in love with him. Mu Shuexin revealed a mocking smile as she coldly glanced at Lu Yu. Lu Yu lowered her eyes. Princess, I'm concerned for you and have no selfish motives. After all, I feel that only you are suited to stand beside Qi Su. So what if Qi Su had been chased out the Qi family? He was handsome and talented, and just with these, he could totally attract a woman's attention. She had also fallen for Qi Su back in the day and that hadn't changed. Previously, Qi Su had the princess by his side and other than admiring him, she did not have other feelings. No matter how much she liked him, she could only stand and watch from afar. However, it was fine if it was the princess, but who did that woman think she was? What rights did she have to occupy the position beside Qi Su? Since the Zhao family brother and sister suffered a defeat in her hands, she did not dare to act blindly without thinking. Thinking it through, she intended to inform the fourth princess of this and use her hand to get rid of young Luo Feng. Unexpectedly, the princess was unconcerned about it. Could it be that she was no longer fond of Qi Su? No matter how Lu Yu guessed, she did not dare to question Mu Shuexin and could only unwillingly watch her leave, while her elegant face was filled with anger. Qi family. In the remote west courtyard, Qi Zheng was thrown on the bed and only opened his eyes after that man left. His eyes were filled with vengeance and killing intent. Qi Su, there will come a day when I'll make those who helped you have a living death. If an uninformed person saw his expression, they would assume that there was an irreconcilable enmity between them and certainly wouldn't think that Qi Su was his son. My lord. Jian Feifei sat on the bed with her head of messy hair making her resemble a madwoman. Her face was filled with blood-red claw marks and her eyes were thoroughly red. Her weak and delicate body was lightly trembling, seemingly extremely pitiful. The precondition was to not look at her face. Jian Feifei originally had a gorgeous appearance and was naturally able to arouse a man's heart. Now that she resembled a madwoman and was disfigured, how could she possibly arouse a man's desire? Feifei, there was no longer heartache in Su Zheng's eyes, only traces of guilt. I implicated you and rest assured, when an opportunity arises in the future, I will tie them up and let you vent your anger. Jian Feifei shook her head. I don't wish for revenge nor to vent my anger. I only want you to be well and this is more important than anything. Her words caused Qi Zheng even more guilt. He honestly didn't know how those people could bear to harm a kind-hearted woman like Jian Feifei. Feifei, once Consort Qin gets news of our situation she'll definitely avenge us. However, she's probably busy dealing with Mu Shuexin and we will have to wait. Su Zheng comforted Jian Feifei and said, at that time, they'll definitely pay the price. I know you're kind-hearted and normally couldn't bear to take revenge, but towards them, there's no need to show mercy. Chapter 1852. Not giving them a single copper. 9. Feifei lowered her head as she softly sobbed spasmodically and so Su Zheng did not notice the concealed malicious look in her eyes the moment she lowered her head. Since Qi Su moved back, he had also brought the old blacksmith and his wife to the Qi family. Now that the Qi family had returned to Qi Su's hands, he also took control of all the treasures in the treasury. However, he was aware that there would be a day when Consort Qin would be aware of what had happened in the Qi family. Therefore, he had to do his utmost in raising his strength. At this moment, the medicine store young Luo Feng established was open for business and this store was named the Spirit Gathering Medicine Hall. The news of the Spirit Gathering medicinal liquids appearance in Fengling town had spread far and wide a few months ago. Now that everyone had heard the name, Spirit Gathering Medicine Hall, many had connected the store with the medicinal liquid in Fengling town. As such, even though the medicine hall was located in the extremely desolate West City, it had become a bustling area as numerous cultivators came for the medicinal liquid. Everyone, other than selling spirit-gathering medicinal liquid, our medicine store will also be selling another item. Shopkeeper Zhao welcomed the incoming customers with smiles as he spoke politely. Following his voice, those who were flocking to snatch the spirit-gathering medicinal liquid had turned their gaze towards him. Men, bring up the puppet. Shopkeeper Zhao did not explain any further but instead directly issued an order. The moment he spoke, 2 men carried a few cages and walked up. Upon witnessing the human figures in the cage, everyone turned pale from fright. Human. The spirit-gathering medicine hall also does human trafficking. No, didn't you hear what Shopkeeper Zhao said earlier on? These are all puppets. Puppets. There's someone in this world able to make puppets. Is this real or am I dreaming? Everyone knew the meaning of puppets. However, they had only heard of it and never encountered one in real life. Now that they saw the cages brought over one by one, they were incapable of freeing themselves from the shock. Shortly after that, Shopkeeper Zhao continued speaking. His words were like a heavy hammer that pounded on their hearts. These puppets possesses God-level cultivation. Can you imagine what this means? Shopkeeper Zhao did not say anything else. But with just the last sentence, it caused everyone to be struck dumb. Not only was this a puppet, but also a God-leveled puppet. If they could purchase it, it would mean that their family would possess a God-level expert. Oh God, this is simply unimaginable. Of course, although everyone was shocked, they were clear that a God-level puppet wasn't the same as spirit-gathering medicinal liquid. It was something that money couldn't even purchase. As this puppet is unique, with its materials hard to obtain and it being even harder to produce, we will only sell 3 puppets every month. Furthermore, Shopkeeper Zhao paused for a moment. According to my family head's request, we do not accept monetary exchange for the puppet. You'll have to exchange items of high value for it. If one isn't enough, you can gather several items to match the selling price. Hearing his words, a wave of commotion spread throughout the crowd. Shopkeeper Zhao, what kind of items can we use to exchange for the puppet? Shopkeeper Zhao had questioned Qi Su about this before and Qi Su had asked young Luo Feng. After hearing the question, Shopkeeper Zhao immediately replied, meteorite heart. The meteorite heart was different from normal meteorites. It's where all the essence of a meteorite was contained and was extremely precious and hard to find. However, a God-level puppet was completely worth this price. Shopkeeper Zhao, is the spirit-gathering medicinal liquid you're selling the rumored medicinal liquid previously in Fengling Town? Chapter 1853. Not giving them a single copper 10. Shopkeeper Zhao smiled, that's right. May I inquire the identity of the owner behind this spirit-gathering medicine store? The man continued questioning. Hearing this question, Shopkeeper Zhao didn't have the slightest annoyance as he continued replying, you'll have to forgive me for being unable to reveal this information. That person was still somewhat unsatisfied having heard his response, but just as he wanted to inquire further, a voice sounded from the rear. Make way, everyone get out the way. Everyone was startled and stepped aside. Soon after, a crowd of officers walked over under everyone's line of sight. The leader was a middle-aged man, with arrogance across his face. The scar on his face made him seem malevolent as his eyes contained a swift and fierce glint. Take away everyone belonging to the medicine store. What? Hearing his orders, everyone was stunned. Why are these officers suddenly arresting them? General Li, aren't you being excessive? Qi Su walked out from behind Shopkeeper Zhao with a cold expression. What crimes have our staff committed for you to arrest all of us? The instant General Li spotted Qi Su, he was startled for a moment. You're the owner of this spirit-gathering medicine store? No, I'm only working for someone. Qi Su frowned. General Li, could you tell me what are your objectives for coming here? HMPH. General Li snorted. Even though Qi Su came out, he did not spare him any face in the slightest. This spirit-gathering medicinal liquid's formulation comes from the Imperial Palace and was stolen a while back. Now that your spirit-gathering medicine store is selling the medicinal liquid, it proves that you entered the palace and committed theft. Men, arrest them all and close down this medicine store. Qi Su knit his brows. He finally understood General Li's purpose in coming. Originally, he assumed that it would take some time before they would attempt to seize the formulation, but unexpectedly, they came during their first day of business. It seemed like someone must have heard the news of spirit-gathering medicinal liquid and had designs on it. According to General Li, this medicinal liquid formulation comes from the palace, and even the puppet's manufacture method is also from the palace. Qi Su quirked his brow and a cold glint streaked across his eyes. Of course. General Li raised his head with arrogance. He was acting upon concubine Qin's orders, and she would be the future Empress Dowager. When she took a fancy to something, who would dare to resist? What? This spirit-gathering medicinal liquid was stolen from the palace, along with the puppet manufacturing method. These people are really courageous to actually dare to steal from the imperial palace. Right now, the officers have even come to find the ones responsible. The crowd had instantly started a discussion after hearing their conversation, while they cast a despising look at the medicine hall. Qi Su's expression sank. Since General Li feels that our medicine store stole the formulation, then someone in the palace must know the method of producing this medicinal liquid. Why don't we invite that person to demonstrate how to concoct the medicinal liquid? If they're able to successfully do so, I'll immediately enter the palace and acknowledge my crimes. General Li was startled. Concubine Qin sent him not only to seal the medicine store but to also seize the formulation. Yet, Qi Su wanted them to demonstrate producing the medicinal liquid on site. Where was he to find that person? Seeing General Li's unsightly expression, Qi Su sneered. So it turns out, this is how the imperial family seizes others' belongings. And they even used such a dignified reason to frame our medicine store. General Li, you were originally an upright person, but after a year you've become so shameless. Chapter 1854. Not giving them a single copper. 11. His changes over this last year were huge. No matter what kind of person General Li was in the past, his current personality was extremely disgraceful. General Li's expression turned white from green, then vice versa. Ultimately, his gaze suddenly became extremely fierce. Qi Su, are you intending to oppose the imperial family? Qi Su coldly said, I'm not opposing the imperial family. I'm merely opposing Consort Qin. There's no need to guess, and I know Consort Qin sent you here. Within the palace, only she could commit such acts. You're uttering nonsense. General Li's expression changed and guilty conscience could be seen from his eyes. Qi Su, you're being treacherous. Consort Qin is warm and virtuous, how could she possibly commit such acts? I accepted orders from the fourth princess and she sent me here to seal the medicine store. That's right, this was also Consort Qin's orders. Not only did she want the spirit-gathering medicinal liquid formulation, she also wanted to discredit Mu Xuexin and make everyone think that the fourth princess was unreasonable. Unfortunately, it would be better to dispatch other subordinates, but she had instead dispatched a brainless general. If you truly accepted orders from the fourth princess, would you use such a tone to expose her identity? In contrast, you are defending Consort Qin. A cold glint streaked across Qi Su's eyes. From your words, I can infer the person you're working for. However, it's fine if you praise Consort Qin, but you have slandered the fourth princess. In reality, there were also many high officials and aristocrats who came for the spirit-gathering medicinal liquid other than those common families. How could they be fools? If General Li was under the fourth princess, he would be doing his utmost in defending her, so why would he directly expose her identity? In contrast, not only did he praise Consort Qin to be warm and virtuous, he was even enraged the moment Qi Su mentioned her. As such, it could be seen whose orders he was under. Within the Luo Feng kingdom, General Li's strength was pretty good, but unfortunately, he was brainless and only used brute force. Originally, Consort Qin thought he was capable and so dispatched him there thinking that it was an easy feat to close down the medicine store. However, how would she know that General Li would make such a speech? Without a doubt, this had exposed her and caused the image she painstakingly upheld to crumble. HMPH. General Li snorted. Qi Su, it's useless no matter what you say. Today, this medicine store is doomed to be sealed. Men, haul everyone away. Instantly the guards standing behind General Li unsheathed their swords and prepared to attack Qi Su. Yet at this moment, Qi Su slowly raised his hand before gradually placing it down. Everyone was somewhat confused, not understanding his actions. However, in the next second, everyone noticed the meaning behind his hand gesture. Shopkeeper Zhao opened the cages and the puppets in the cage came out in haste. Similar to a gigantic mountain landing, it caused the entire ground to tremble. They released their imposing might without restraint as they expressionlessly gazed at the uninvited guests. This God level. General Li turned pale from shock. Qi Su actually had God-leveled experts by his side. Although he had also broken through to God level, he wasn't facing only one God-level expert at this moment. Recalling Qi Su's previous words, he gritted his teeth and asked, "Qi Su, are these puppets?" Qi Su sneered. "Didn't you claim my lord stole the palace's puppet manufacturing method? Then why are you asking if they're puppets?" Chapter 1855. Not giving them a single copper. 12. General Li wasn't aware that the spirit-gathering medicine store also sold puppets and Consort Qin did not inform him about that. Therefore, he merely went along with Qi Su's words earlier on. Thinking of this, General Li raised his chin and his arrogant face contained traces of his determination to win. "That's right, these puppets originated from the palace and I'm only returning them to their rightful owner. Qi Su, you better tactfully hand over the spirit-gathering medicine store, or else your ending will definitely be miserable." "Then I'd like to see how miserable my ending will be." Qi Su had seen shameless people before, but he hadn't seen someone shameless to this extent. It was no wonder the current General Li would become a jackal in the same tribe with Consort Qin. "Impudent!" General Li loudly shouted and the few puppets moved. Their ice-cold gazes coldly stared at General Li, with an expression seemingly like looking at a dead man. General Li's expression suddenly changed. Sensing the aura these few puppets radiated, he fiercely sucked in a breath of cold air. "Qi Su, you'll pay the price for your actions of today." After saying this, he waved his hands and said in a stern tone, "Let's go." A wise man submits to circumstances. With the powerful imperial family, how could they be helpless in dealing with Qi Su? The matter of vital importance now was to return to the palace and report this to Consort Qin. In a luxurious and unique imperial palace, a beautiful woman lazily leaned on a chaise lounge, with two palace maids fanning her at one side. There was even someone kneeling while holding the teacup and quietly waiting for her consumption. This beautiful woman was extremely gorgeous, with supple skin and brows similar to half-moons, looking sweet-tempered at a glance. However, her seductive pair of eyes instead contained a malicious intent. "Mother." Suddenly, a 7 to 8-year-old little boy bounced and hopped as he ran in. Burrowing into the beautiful woman's embrace, he looked up and asked, "Mother, why isn't father dead yet?" If his words were overheard by the officials in the court, it would certainly cause a massive commotion. However, those who were in this palace were her trusted aides and naturally, they didn't need to restrain themselves. The beautiful woman lowered her eyes and gently stroked his head, while the malicious intent was replaced with an indulgent look. "The physician has diagnosed that your father only has a few months left. Don't tell me you aren't even willing to wait that long." The little prince pouted, seemingly arrogant and willful. "If he passes away earlier, this Luo Feng kingdom would be mine. At that time, I'll ruthlessly torture that slut Mu Xuexin. Who told her to snatch away father's love from me? Like mother, like son. How much better could the son be, when he had a mother with this kind of moral integrity?" Although the little prince was still young, he had long hated Mu Xuexin deep within his bones under the influence of Consort Qin's teaching. It was to the extent that he even hated his father. "Do you really wish for your father to die?" "Of course." The little prince held his head high and his chest out. "I'm father's only son yet he doesn't even shower me with love. He only cares about that slut Mu Xuexin. As his son, I should be the one he pampers, and why pamper a daughter? Everyone knows that daughters are spilled water and it's useless to care for them. In any case, they are to be married in the future." Consort Qin's gaze was comforting. "What my son thinks is correct. It is just that you can't casually say this in public as there are many ministers who stand in Mu Xuexin's faction. To prevent side issues from arising, there are some things we should keep in our heart." Chapter 1856. Like Mother, Like Son. 1. "Yes, Imperial Mother, your son understands." The little prince buried his head in Consort Qin's embrace and grumbled. "Imperial Mother, those ministers are still trying to save Imperial Father and they don't even treat me as the Emperor. Aren't they stupid? I'm the only son Imperial Father has, and who would be the Emperor if not me?" In any case, this position would certainly be his and no one could vie with him. Since my son very much wishes for his death, I shall think of methods for you. Right now, head towards your imperial father's palace and remember, cry the moment you see your imperial father, to show your filial piety. Imperial mother will settle the rest for you. Consort Qin lowered her eyes while a ruthless glint flashed across. The little prince no longer pestered her and retreated after bowing. Looking at the little prince's departing figure, a sinister trace surfaced in Consort Qin's eyes. Men, summon Imperial Physician Yu. Yes, Consort Qin, a palace maid retreated after hearing the orders. A moment later, a middle-aged man slowly walked in with the palace maid's lead. After he walked in, Consort Qin dismissed her servants and a cold glint streaked across her narrowed eyes. Imperial Physician Yu, I want you to make the Emperor die 3 days from now. Imperial Physician Yu was startled as his astonishingly looked at Consort Qin. Consort Qin, you can't wait any longer. That's right, the reason why the Emperor fell sick was related to Consort Qin. Originally, the Emperor's health had been in decline ever since the Empress's passing, to the extent of being bedridden. Of course, if he were to carefully nurse his health, it wasn't impossible to recover. However, Imperial Physician Yu, who was the leader of the physician court, was on Consort Qin's side. He had no alternative options as Consort Qin had discovered his weakness and so, he could only vow his loyalty to her. As Imperial Physician Yu deliberately caused the Emperor's condition to worsen, it resulted in him being unconscious. That's right, Consort Qin smiled and said, who told this dog Emperor to favor his daughter instead of his son? Also, he has been unwilling to make my son the crown prince. Therefore, he brought this situation upon himself. Imperial Physician Yu, help me this one last time and after my son successfully ascends the throne, you won't be treated unfairly. Furthermore, I can make the decision and gift you the 100-stock spirit herb. Traces of greed flashed across Imperial Physician Yu's eyes. To him, position wasn't important and spirit herbs were what he wanted the most. He previously secretly stole spirit herbs of the physician court and was discovered by Consort Qin's men, and thus joined her faction. After all, if this incident were to be known by the Emperor, what awaited him was not only losing his standing but also being trapped in prison. What orders does Consort Qin has? When giving his medicine today, add another stock of poison herb that'll cause his death 3 days from now. I believe Imperial Physician Yu has the method to make it undetectable and prevent others from knowing. Imperial Physician Yu was silent for a moment and asked, why 3 days later? Because I want the blame for the Emperor's death by poisoning to be shifted to that slut Mu Shuexin. Consort Qin never met the previous Empress, but from Mu Shuexin's appearance, it could be seen how devastatingly gorgeous the Empress was. As a result, the Emperor hadn't been able to forget her for many years. It was also because of this that Consort Qin's hatred for Mu Shuexin was much deeper. It had never occurred to her that it wasn't due to the Empress that the Emperor wasn't fond of her, but instead, due to her being incapable of attracting the Emperor's attention. Imperial Physician Yu's heart turned cold and he unconsciously sighed. It seems like with the Emperor's death, Consort Qin would no longer tolerate Mu Shuexin. Chapter 1857. Like mother, like son too. Imperial Physician Yu did not linger for long before General Li entered in haste with an unsightly expression. Consort Qin, the spirit-gathering medicine store manager, is Qi Su, and that son of a bitch was too much. He actually dared to humiliate the imperial family in public, completely not placing any importance on the imperial family. Consort Qin's eyes darkened. You failed the task of closing down the spirit-gathering medicine store. Furthermore, that store is related to Qi Su. Previously, the spirit-gathering liquid was sold in Fengling town and naturally, Consort Qin wasn't aware and neither did Qi Zheng inform her, afraid that the formulation would be snatched by her. However, since the spirit-gathering medicine store opened in Empire City, there was no reason Consort Qin would be in the dark with her capabilities. It's Qi Su, that son of a bitch. General Li gnashed his teeth in hatred. Not only does he has the spirit-gathering medicinal liquid, but he has also produced god-level puppets. Puppets in the god-level realm. Consort Qin's heart suddenly skipped a beat as a glint streaked across her eyes. If these puppets became mine, I'll have the capability to oppose those ministers. Summon Qi Su to meet me. He shouldn't have known that was my order and is pardonable. If he understands that I want the spirit-gathering medicinal liquid, he'll definitely offer it with both hands. Consort Qin stuck out her chest as she ordered while being on her high horse. General Li's expression was somewhat embarrassed. Qi Su knows I belong to your faction. What? Consort Qin's expression changed. He knows it's me yet he dares to do so. I'm his aunt. Does he disregards an elder's orders now? This Qi Su was too excessive, without the slightest upbringing. She truly didn't know how his mother had brought him up. Furthermore, General Li cautiously glanced at Consort Qin. Before I came, I asked around and heard that Qi Su supposedly had the formulation, but sold it to the Tianqi Kingdom's second prince a few days ago. I believe that this medicine store should be the second prince's. Although General Li was stupid, he was aware of what to do. After he left in defeat, he had asked around about the medicine store's owner. The moment he inquired, he had managed to obtain information. The Empire City's locals weren't aware of Fengling Town's affairs, but they obtained the information from hearsay. As for the rumor of selling the formulation to the second prince, it was the second prince who deliberately spread the rumor to help Qi Su, with the objective to create a misconception. If the medicine store was the second prince's, it wasn't as simple to seize the store by force. Otherwise, it would start a war between two countries and the gains wouldn't make up for the losses. Consort Qin nearly spat blood from anger as her beautiful face became twisted. Qi Su, that bastard, sold that formulation to the second prince instead of gifting it to his aunt. The Qi family has truly brought him up in waste. Your Highness, that bastard is really too much, to rather sell it to the second prince than our Luo Feng kingdom. He's completely an ungrateful bastard. Supposedly, General Li spoke to agree to Consort Qin's words, but who knew he would cause her to become more enraged. What do you mean sell to our Luo Feng kingdom? Not only am I the imperial consort, I'm also his aunt. Giving me his belongings is to his honor, and why should he take money? Consort Qin tightly clenched her fists. If Qi Su was before her, she would kill him without a doubt. Your Highness, are we to forget about this just like that? General Li carefully and cautiously asked. Consort Qin had an ashen complexion as she said, we don't have the capability to close down the medicine hall, but Qi Su cannot be forgiven. However, I have something more important, and after my son ascends the throne, that will be the day that this Qi family brother and sister die. Chapter 1858. Like Mother, Like Son 3. Her face became twisted due to rage and her trembling delicate body radiated traces of cold air. Comparatively speaking, dealing with Mu Xuexin was more important than Qi Su. Therefore, she would spare his life for the time being. General Li, follow me to visit the Emperor. Consort Qin took a deep breath and stood up from the chaise lounge. The time for the Emperor to consume the medicine has passed, and she was confident that Imperial Physician Yu had succeeded. Emperor's bedroom chambers. The little prince knelt before the Emperor's bed and cried uncontrollably as if the Emperor had met his end. However, his head had always been buried on the bed, and so no one discovered that he was only crying out loud without tears. There wasn't a single trace of tears on his face. Of course, the little prince's heart-wrenching wails caused the ministers keeping watch in the bedroom to be emotionally moved. Sigh, the little prince is really filial. He has been visiting the Emperor every day, but in comparison, I wonder where the fourth princess disappeared to. The Emperor doted on the fourth princess the most, and right now she is truly being unfilial. She couldn't even be compared to a single strand of hair on the little prince. All the ministers shook their heads and sighed with disapproval in their eyes. As Mu Xuexin hadn't appeared in the Emperor's bedroom chambers for a few days, it caused everyone to be bitterly disappointed. After all, the Emperor doted on the fourth princess the most. Your servant pays her respects to Consort Qin. A wave of salutation sounded outside the doors. Soon after, Consort Qin entered and slowly walked to the Emperor's sickbed. The fourth princess hasn't come. Consort Qin's expression contained discontent. This fourth princess is too much. The Emperor is bedridden and she doesn't even know to keep guard by his side. Yesterday, she even came looking for me, saying that she is mutually in love with the Qi family's Qi Mo, and wished for me to grant their marriage in place of the Emperor. What? Without a doubt, Consort Qin's words were similar to a heavy hammer, causing everyone to turn pale from shock. The fourth princess wishes to marry Qi Mo. Doesn't she have a marriage agreement with Qi Su? Although Qi Su had been chased out of Qi family, Now the emperor is seriously ill, so how could she be concerned about her relationship and abandon the emperor without concern? With this, all the ministers were unhappy with Mu Shuexin's actions, and only a few ministers believed she wouldn't be so unfilial. A smile quirked on Consort Qin's lips as her lowered eyes concealed her complacent smirk. She quietly gazed at the man lying on the sickbed while a cold glint flashed through her eyes. Your Majesty, since you dote on the fourth princess so much and can't forget about the Empress, your consort shall send you all to have a family reunion in a few days. Fourth princess. Just as Consort Qin was pondering how to torment Mu Shuexin, the palace maid's voice could be heard outside. Soon after, Mu Shuexin dressed in pink walked in from the doors and spotted Consort Qin standing in the room with a glance. Her eyes then revealed traces of hatred. Fourth princess, you're finally here, Consort Qin faintly smiled. I thought you didn't care about the emperor. If so, the emperor would have wasted his doting on you. Mu Shuexin snorted. Does keeping watch by imperial father's side represent my filial piety? If you have the spare energy, why don't you think of how to save him? Then has the fourth princess found any methods to cure the emperor? Consort Qin's eyes flickered as she gently asked. Mu Shuexin bit her lips. I haven't found any right now, but I will do my best to save him. Is that so? Consort Qin sneered, and the mocking in her eyes was obvious. Those ministers present could no longer continue watching and couldn't help but criticize her. Chapter 1859. Like Mother, Like Son, 4. Fourth princess, the emperor doesn't have many days left, and on the account that he doted on you for numerous years, it's better if you stay guard by the emperor's side these few days. The one speaking was Lu Yu's father, the cabinet minister Lu Yi. That's right, Grand Tutor Zhao also cast a disapproving gaze at Mu Shuexin. What Lord Lu says is reasonable. Upon arriving, you found fault with Consort Qin and the little prince. However, Consort Qin and the little prince had been guarding by the emperor's side for many days. In comparison, you were missing for the whole day. What's even more absurd is that you requested Consort Qin to bestow you a marriage during this situation. Fourth princess, it's of your business to have mutual feelings with Qi Mo, but the emperor is seriously ill and you have the spare energy to care about your relationship. Aren't you letting the emperor down? Lu Yi furiously said while revealing a grieving expression. All of a sudden, Mu Shuexin widened her eyes. She was mutually in love with Qi Mo, and even requested concubine Qin to bestow a marriage. Could this woman be more shameless? Instantly, Mu Shuexin furiously glared at concubine Qin. Consort Qin, a shameless person like you dares to tarnish my reputation. When have I ever been mutually in love with Qi Mo? Clearly, it was you who wanted to gift me to Qi Mo as a concubine. Following Mu Shuexin's voice, all the ministers' sight gathered on Consort Qin's face. Consort Qin covered her mouth in shock and cast a painful gaze at Mu Shuexin. Her expression was just like she was blaming Mu Shuexin for framing her. Of course, at this moment, Consort Qin fiercely pinched the little prince's leg while everyone wasn't paying attention. Immediately, tears flowed down from his face as he pounced towards Mu Shuexin. Bad woman, you're framing my mother. I personally witnessed you and cousin Qi Mo bantering flirtatiously. I also saw you kneeling before my mother to ask about a marriage. His fists fiercely struck Mu Shuexin. It was reasonable to say that Mu Shuexin could have sent the little prince flying with one hand, but at this moment, the aura radiating from General Li prevented her from moving. As his aura was only aimed at Mu Shuexin, others hadn't noticed it. Bad woman, father's doting is wasted on you. You're the imperial family's misfortune, a disgrace. The little prince's fists fiercely hammered on Mu Shuexin. She sucked in a cold breath from anger and viciously glared at the little prince. However, she hadn't moved in the slightest, but the little prince's body suddenly fell back with a bang as he fell on the ground. Imperial son. Consort Qin hastily went up and supported the little prince. She glanced at Mu Shuexin with bitterness and said, previously you came looking for a marriage and even asked me to shoulder the blame by saying I am the one who forced you to marry. As such, you wouldn't be blamed for being unfilial. However, I'm honestly unwilling to witness the emperor being so pitiful and so, had revealed this matter. However, tears spilled from Consort Qin's face. I never expected you would make false accusations and even framed me as such. Just because I had exposed your true colors before everyone. It's fine framing me, but why did you raise your hands against my son? He's still a child and no matter what mistakes he has done, How could you, as his sister, injure him? Mu Shuexin had never encountered such shameless people before and trembled from anger. Her elegant petite face was also incomparably pale. I didn't injure him, he was the one hitting me. Fourth princess. Consort Qin carried the little prince and stood up, while her eyes filled with grief gazed at Mu Shuexin. There wasn't anger in her eyes, only the emotions of resentment. You said you hadn't hit my child. Then why would he fall down without a reason? Chapter 1860. Like Mother, Like Son 5. Mu Shuexin slowly closed her eyes. After a long time, she opened her eyes. There was no emotion in her clear eyes. First, I didn't even touch him, so I'm not going to take the blame, and second, even if I beat him, so what? He beat me first. I just want to warn you, you can never escape God's retribution for all your deeds. If you do too many bad things, you'll have retribution sooner or later. You witch, you'll have retribution. You'll be damned. The little prince raised his head and glared at Mu Shuexin. Mother said it was because of this woman that father ignored him. This woman took her father from her. So she deserved to die. Mu Shuexin snorted and turned her eyes to the man on the bed. This time I came to take my father away. No. The first person who objected was Lu Yi. He frowned and said, the emperor is seriously ill in bed and can't stand being roughly moved. Where will you take him? I'm taking father to the princess's estate outside the imperial city. The emperor loved Mu Shuexin very much. In addition to the princess's estate in the imperial palace, there was also another one outside the imperial palace, but Mu Shuexin barely lived there. So there wasn't even a maid in the estate except for a few servants who were responsible for cleaning up. Consort Qin fluttered her eyelids. She had planned to force Mu Shuexin to stay with the emperor. Then when she poisoned the emperor to death, she could dump the blame on her. She didn't expect that this woman wanted to take the emperor away. Then her plan was easier to carry out. Princess, I'm afraid it's not proper. If you take His Majesty out of the imperial palace, there won't be any physician available. Then how can he recover? Physician. Mu Shuexin sneered. Father fell sick from overwork. If he takes a good rest, even if he can't immediately recover, he won't be like this. Obviously, he was harmed by those quacks. Don't worry, I'll look for famous physicians and ask them to treat father. If he can't be cured, I'm willing to die as an apology. Look for famous physicians. In this world, was there a physician who could cure father? She was taking her father away because she didn't want to meet Consort Qin and her son every time she came to the imperial palace. She would rather spend a few months outside. Besides, she would rather follow father after he died than become Qimo's concubine. Your Excellency. Seeing Lu Yi was going to say something, Consort Qin immediately interrupted him. Since Princess wants to do it, why don't we satisfy her? And I'll go to see His Majesty from time to time. The emperor was seriously ill, so the most powerful person in the imperial palace was Consort Qin. Since she had agreed, no one dared to say no. Mu Shuexin coldly glanced at Consort Qin, and ordered coldly, guards, take father away. Besides, in this period of time, no one is allowed to enter my princess's estate without my permission. She meant Consort Qin. Consort Qin's face changed. Know what she was implying, she gave a ferocious smile. Mu Shuexin, I'll allow you to live for a few more days. In 3 days, you must die. At this moment, in the courtyard of the Qi family, young Luo Feng sat quietly in the pavilion, listening to Qi Su's report. Miss Yun, although General Li tried to make trouble for us, thanks to him, the medicinal liquids of our spirit-gathering pharmacy were sold out, and the 3 puppets were also sold. And someone sold us some meteorite heart. Meteorite heart? Young Luo Feng's eyes lit up. With the meteorite heart, she could forge puppets as powerful as Yun Yi. Chapter 1861. Like Mother, Like Son 6. Young Luo Feng took over the meteorite heart Qi Su handed to her and asked with a smile, what else happened besides that? Qi Su fell silent and seemed to be worried. Seeing through him, young Luo Feng asked mildly, are you worried about the 4th princess? Qi Su slightly nodded. I didn't plan to see her so early, but I heard Qimo said that Consort Qin wanted to marry her to Qimo as a concubine, so I'm a bit worried. Quote. From what he knew of Mu Shuexin, she wouldn't be able to bear such a grievance. Then I ask you, is there any way to see Mu Shuexin? Young Luo Feng asked seriously, her fingers gently tapping the table. In the imperial city, there are 2 princesses' estates. One is in the imperial palace and the other out of it, but she rarely lives in the latter one. So, if you want to see her, you have to go to the imperial palace. He was not qualified to enter the imperial palace, and those people wouldn't let him see Mu Shuexin either. Just then, a guard came in a hurry. Second young master. This guard was not from the Qi family but rather had followed Qi Su before. What's the matter? Qi Su frowned and asked. The 4th princess is here and she wants to meet second young master. Qi Su's body shivered and his eyes were lit up. His heart was filled with joy, but he tried his best to restrain it. How did Mu know that I'm here in the Qi family? Let her in. Yes, second young master. The guard slowly left. After a while, Mu Shuexin walked in led by the guard. From a distance, she saw the tall young man, and her clear eyes sparkled with joy. She hadn't seen him for a year, and he was still so handsome, but she felt as if she hadn't seen him for a lifetime. Qi Su. She stopped not far from Qi Su, and gazed at him, as if looking at her whole world. Mu'er, you've come. Qi Su didn't ask her how she knew he was in the Qi family, nor did he have to ask. Now the only thing in his mind was this girl in front of him. Qi Su, you shouldn't have come back, Mu Shuexin said with a wry smile. The imperial city is unstable now, and father is ill in bed. I can't help you. I came back this time to seek justice for myself. A cold gleam flickered across Qi Su's eyes. The Qi family has today's status because of my master. I will never surrender my master's achievements to the Qi family. Mu Shuexin had a lump in her throat, and she suddenly felt that Qi Su had grown up a lot in the last 1 year. Miss Yun. Suddenly, she saw the woman sitting in the bower, and she gave her a grateful smile. I heard that Qi Su was accompanied by a woman, and I guessed it was you. Thank you for your help that day. Otherwise, I might be buried on Lingchuan Mountain. Ah, Sister Mu, you've come. Before young Luo Feng replied, a small figure rushed from the side. Qi Ling's body was soft, her smile was sweet and she looked so innocent. She was no longer as cowardly as the first time she met young Luo Feng. Young Luo Feng put down the book in her hand and looked up slightly. Her wicked eyes fell slowly on Mu Shuexin. The emperor of the Luo Feng kingdom is seriously ill in bed. What's the matter with him? Quote. Mu Shuexin's eyes darkened. He is ill because he has been mourning my mother all these years. However, because of those quacks in the imperial hospital, he didn't recover, but fell into a coma. Chapter 1862, Healing 1. Could you take me to see him? Young Luo Feng slightly narrowed her eyes and there was a light in them. If she could defeat her enemy without a fight, she didn't mind leveraging other powers. If she could cure the Luo Feng kingdom's emperor, be it the Qi family or consort Qi, she wouldn't have to deal with them by herself. Mu Shuexin froze, then shook her head with a wry smile and said, Miss Yun, no one can cure my father. You'd better not get yourself into this trouble. Otherwise, it'll surely affect you. Since both father and she were going to die anyway, why should she get an innocent person involved? In particular, this innocent person not only was Qi Ling's master but also saved her life. Sister Mu, take my master to have a look. My master's medical skills are excellent and she should be able to cure his majesty. In Qi Ling's heart, young Luo Feng was an omnipotent god. There was nothing in the world that young Luo Feng couldn't do. Mu Shuexin smiled helplessly at Qi Ling's expectant eyes. She looked up at young Luo Feng and said, I've taken father out of the imperial palace. I can take you to see him. If you can't cure him, you can leave secretly. If it was in the imperial palace, it would be rather inconvenient under so many eyes. Fortunately, she had already taken father out of the palace, and if young Luo Feng couldn't cure him, no one would blame her. Let's go. Young Luo Feng closed the book in her hands and said mildly. Now, Mu Shuexin, somewhat surprised, asked. Young Luo Feng glanced at her. Yes, is it inconvenient for you? No, said Mu Shuexin helplessly, please come with me. The princess's estate. It was silent. Outside the East Wing room, seeing Mu Shuexin coming from a distance, two guards respectfully made an obeisance, "Your Highness. I'm bringing someone to see my father. Guard outside. Don't let anyone in." "Yes, Your Highness." The two guards guarded the door. "Miss Yun, these guards were given to me by father. They are absolutely loyal to me. You don't need to worry about them leaking any information." With that, Mu Shuexin pushed the door open. "It doesn't matter even if you can't cure my father." After all, she had already given up. Inside the room, a pale man was lying on the bed. His handsome face was full of pain, and his breathing was very weak, as if he would disappear at any moment. Young Luo Feng's face darkened as she saw the man lying on the bed. "Miss Yun, what's the matter?" Mu Shuexin noticed the changes in Young Luo Feng and questioned. Young Luo Feng frowned slightly. "Who fed him medicine today?" "An imperial maid. Is there any problem?" Mu Shuexin felt her heart skip a beat. Was there something wrong with today's medicinal soup? In the medicinal soup he took today there was a spirit herb called Dream Returning Grass. Young Luo Feng's eyes darkened bit by bit. Dream Returning Grass is very powerful. If anyone takes it they will die in their sleep within 3 days. Dream Returning Grass. Mu Shuexin's face went white. "How do you know that father took the Dream Returning Grass?" "He has the smell of Dream Returning Grass on him." "Imperial physician, you dared to feed the emperor Dream Returning Grass because it was colorless and tasteless, so no one would discover it." However, young Luo Feng's mental strength was very strong, and the Dream Returning Grass was a psychotropic spirit herb, so she could feel it with her mental strength. Chapter 1863, Healing 2. Of course, she wouldn't tell Mu Shuexin about this. Mu Shuexin was not a physician, so she didn't know the Dream Returning Grass was colorless and odorless. Then what should I do? Mu Shuexin almost collapsed to the ground and bit her lips tightly. "I thought father would be with me for a few months more, but I didn't expect." In fact, young Luo Feng paused and continued, "Even without this Dream Returning Grass, he has only 2 months to live." Qi Su hadn't spoken since he entered the room. He supported the trembling Mu Shuexin for fear that she couldn't stand the blow. "Master," Qi Ling hugged young Luo Feng's legs and looked at her pitifully, "do you have a way to save the emperor?" Young Luo Feng gazed at the man lying in bed. He fell ill from overwork. It's not a big problem. He would have been able to recover soon if he keeps taking spirit herbs, but, young Luo Feng paused, someone replaced the heavenly spirit ginseng in his medicinal soup with marsh ginseng, so he didn't recover, and even his body was worn down. Mu Shuexin forced himself to calm down and asked, "What's the difference between the two kinds of ginsengs?" "The difference is that the ginseng growing in a marsh is contaminated with the poison of the marsh, and it is difficult to distinguish between the two kinds of ginsengs. This poison won't kill him immediately, but will gradually corrode his body." The heavenly spirit ginseng plus the Dream Returning Grass. It was very clear that someone was trying to kill her father. Consort Qin, it must be her. Except for this woman, Mu Shuexin couldn't think of anyone else. "Miss Yun," Mu Shuexin suddenly knelt down in front of Yun Luo Feng and begged bitterly, "Since you know what illness father has, you must have a way to cure him. Please save my father. As long as you save him, I will obey your orders for the rest of my life." Dignity. What was that? Was it as important as her father's life? She was willing to give her life for her father's life, let alone her dignity. Qi Su, seeing Mu Shuexin kneeling down, also hurriedly knelt down in front of Yun Luo Feng. "Boss, please save His Majesty." Since there was no outsider here, he didn't call Yun Luo Feng Miss Yun, but called her boss. Qi Ling blinked and also knelt on the ground. "Master, please help Sister Mu." Young Luo Feng looked at the three kneeling before her and turned her eyes to Mu Shuexin whose face was full of tears. "I didn't say I wouldn't save him." Mu Shuexin was very glad to hear that. She looked up at Yun Luo Feng gleefully. "Miss Yun, are you willing to save my father?" "Saving him is saving myself." Young Luo Feng paused and continued, "Besides, Qi Su and Qi Ling have both asked me to save him. How can I refuse it? For the sake of Qi Ling alone, she would save him. But the poison of the Dream Returning Grass is working. Next, he will see the person he most wants to see and enjoy 3 days with that person. But after the 3 days, he will bleed from his nose and die. Young Luo Feng stroked her chin and pondered, so I have to detoxify him first. Miss Yun, if you need any spirit herb, just tell me and I will bring it to you. Mu Shuexin's face was filled with joy. At first, she had no expectations of Yun Luofeng. Now, when she saw Yun Luofeng easily diagnose her father, and even knew what medicinal herbs he had taken, her heart was filled with hope. Chapter 1864. Ghost Emperor and Ji Judian 1. She was like a drowning man grasping for a straw. Okay, Yun Luofeng nodded, I'll tell you what spirit herbs I need. Please find them for me. Of course, the sooner the better, I'm afraid he doesn't have enough time. Hearing this, Mu Shuexin immediately had someone bring them a paper and a writing brush. Yun Luofeng wrote the medicinal herbs required for detoxification on the paper with the writing brush. Boil these spirit herbs in 100 barrels of water until it's condensed to 1 barrel, and let him have a medicated bath for a day and a night in it. After that, the toxins of the dream-returning grass will be removed. After handing the prescription to Mu Shuexin, Yun Luofeng wrote another one. This is for removing the marsh poison. But you should feed the medicinal soup to him instead of giving him a medicated bath. 2 days later, the marsh poison can be removed and he will wake up. Yun Luofeng's hand paused and she said, I'll also write you a prescription for body conditioning. After he wakes up, decoct the herbs and feed him the medicinal soup. Within half a month, your father will fully recover. Mu Shuexin tightly held the prescriptions, her eyes full of gratitude. If Yun Luofeng could really cure father, then she was the savior of the Luo Feng kingdom. Besides that, Yun Luofeng paused and glanced at Mu Shuexin, since someone wants to murder him, you'd better stay close to the emperor these days, so as not to give those people a chance. Even if Yun Luofeng didn't remind her, Mu Shuexin knew what to do. A grim gleam flickered across her eyes as she thought that those people tried to kill her father for power. I understand, Miss Yun, thank you very much. Whether father can recover or not, I'll repay your kindness with the rest of my life. With a faint smile, Yun Luofeng looked back at Qi Su, are you staying here or leaving with me? Qi Su was in a daze. He wanted to stay with Mu Shuexin, but he finally shook his head. There are a lot of things I have to deal with in the spirit-gathering pharmacy, and, a complicated light flashed through his eyes, if I stay here, I will cause troubles for Mu'er. If Consort Qin's men knew he was in the princess's estate, they would send people here to get him. At that time, if they found the emperor was going to recover, they would try to murder him again. Just in case, he'd better not stay here these days. With this in mind, Qi Su looked at Mu Shuexin again, and he lowered his eyes to conceal his love for her. Xiaoling, let's go. Okay, brother. Qi Ling's face brightened with an innocent smile. It seemed that something occurred to her. She tilted her head and looked at Mu Shuexin with her big clear eyes. Sister Mu, when my brother finishes his matters, we'll visit you again. Mu Shuexin smiled and didn't ask them to stay. Now there was only her father in her mind. How could she have the heart to care about love and romance at this time? Besides, Qi Su was right. In the present situation, they shouldn't stay here. Qi Su took Qi Ling's hand and slowly walked out. When they came out of the room, his steps paused and he pondered, pursing his lips. Even though he didn't say a word, Yun Luofeng still saw the concerns about Mu Shuexin on his face. I don't know if we can ride out the 3 days. 3 days later, the emperor would be awake. At that time, in the Luo Feng kingdom, no one could hurt her. Chapter 1865, Ghost Emperor and Ji Judian 2. Yun Luofeng kept quiet for a while and said slowly, if you are worried about her, I can lend you 2 puppets to secretly protect her. She was never stingy to her men. Since Qi Su now worked for her, she wouldn't treat him poorly. Thank you. Qi Su's voice was a little choked and his eyes were full of gratitude. Helping Mu'er is helping me. From now on, I'll give you my life as long as you need it. Yun Luofeng raised her eyes slightly. She looked so proud and arrogant that no one would dare to offend her. As I said, from the very beginning, my goal is to control the whole continent. And you, as my subordinate, will follow me to the peak after I become the king of the world. So you don't have to thank me. You just need to do the jobs I give to you well. The woman's voice was crisp and melodious, but it easily stirred the heart of Qi Su. Control the whole continent. Become the king of the world. Only she could achieve this great goal. Qi Su felt his blood surge for the first time, and perhaps the best choice he made in his life was picking her up that day. And what about the men I asked you to find for me? Luo Feng frowned. The continent of wind and cloud was not large. Where were Yun Xiao and Ji Judian? I've sent people to look for them, and I believe as time goes by, we'll find them. Thinking of this matter, Qi Su was a bit frustrated. He had been searching for them for a long time, but he failed to find them. However, he would never give up. After all, Luo Feng only made this request to him. Luo Feng slightly narrowed her eyes and looked at the blue sky not far away. There was a resolute light in her black and cold eyes. I see. Now you've almost got the Qi family in your hands. You can send more people to find them. You have to find them. Yes, boss. Qi Su respectfully responded, wondering in his heart what the relationship between the two men and Miss Yun was. It seemed that they were very important to her. The lofty and steep mountains extended for tens of thousands of miles. The sky that was supposed to be blue was covered by dark clouds. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. In the sky, two men stood back to back, their robes were fluttering in the gale, and they looked so domineering. The two men were both very handsome. One of them was in a fiery red robe, and his long black hair was fluttering in the wind. With a point of cinnabar between his eyebrows, he looked so charming. This man looked so wicked, with a chilly smile on his enchanting face. Standing back to him was a man in black. The enchanting red-robed man couldn't overshadow him but served as a foil to him. With a majestic and handsome face, he looked like a god. A single glance of him would take people's breath away. Like the eyes of a hawk, his eyes were cold and sharp and looked unfathomable in the darkness. Ghost Emperor, Ji Judian smiled, I never expected I would need your help one day. Yun Xiao was expressionless and looked as cold as a god of death. He was like a god, looking down at his people from the sky. I'll destroy anyone she hates, and protect anyone she cares about. Don't thank me, you should thank her. Every time Ji Judian looked at Luo Feng, his eyes were shining with love for her. By rights, he should take him as a rival in love. However, Ji Judian was different from Bai Su. Bai Su hadn't loved Luo Feng. He just wanted her ability. In fact, he had hurt Luo Feng many times. Chapter 1866, Ji Judian's Admirer 1. So Yun Xiao tried to kill him. Though Ji Judian fell for Luo Feng, he never did anything to hurt her and even saved her life several times. So how could he kill him to make her sad? Besides, even if the man was his rival in love, so what? He had confidence in his Fenger, and in himself that no one could take his woman from him. Ji Judian smiled enchantingly. Ghost Emperor, in my life, I have never admired anyone except you. No man could care for his woman like he cared for Luo Feng. I feel the same about you. Yun Xiao answered him coldly, and his sharp and murderous eyes turned to the crowd approaching them. Ghost Emperor, we haven't had a competition since we met for the first time. Why don't we? With a bright smile on his face, he looked so charming, see which one of us can kill more people. Do you dare to accept my challenge? Yun Xiao was cold to everyone except when facing Luo Feng. Hearing Ji Judian's words, he answered with his actions. More and more people surrounded them, but they fell to the ground one after another under his sharp sword. It was a one-sided slaughter. Killing. It used to be a daily routine for him. When he first met her, he told her that the only thing in his life was killing before he met her. She was the only sunshine in his life, illuminating his entire world. Thinking of that woman with a perfect face and wicked behavior, Yun Xiao couldn't help but give a faint smile. It seemed that he had to solve these people as soon as possible. After that, he could go find her. Though there were a lot of them out there, they couldn't resist these two men. No matter how many they were, they would only end up dead. Ha ha. Ji Judian laughed wildly, his long black hair was flying in the wind, and he looked so arrogant and wicked. Ghost Emperor, I didn't expect that I would join hands with you against the enemy one day. But it feels good. They were rivals in love, so what? Even though he was his rival in love, he still appreciated him a lot. If such a man accompanied young Luo Feng in her life, he wouldn't be worried about her. Sometimes, love didn't mean possession. He just wanted his beloved woman to live a happy life. So he never thought about how to force her to accept his love. All these people fell down, and their blood flowed over the mountain and dyed it dazzlingly red. Stop it. Suddenly, a girl's voice was heard. Ji Judian didn't stop. As his hands moved, the last person fell to the ground. At this time, a girl in red rushed to him. She was fair-skinned and pretty. She bit her lips, looking painfully and sadly at Ji Judian. Ji Judian, why are you so cruel to me? Am I ugly? Why don't you like me? Ji Judian slightly raised his charming slanted eyes, looked down at the weeping girl and sneered, yes, you are. In my eyes, even a beggar is better than you. His words were so cruel, and he was looking at her as if he was looking down on an ant. The girl felt that her heart was broken into several pieces. She didn't expect that Ji Judian would say such cruel words. Ji Judian, I really like you. I fell in love with you when I met you for the first time. She still remembered how she met the man in the garden a few months ago. At that time, he, in a fiery red robe, stood under a peach tree and looked stunningly enchanting. Chapter 1867, Ji Judian's Admirer 2. She had never met such a beautiful man before, so she had a crush on him. But his eyes were so lonely, proud, arrogant and defiant. A single glance of his captured her heart and she could no longer forget him since then. For your father's sake, I can spare your life. Ji Judian slightly raised his eyes and said arrogantly, however, you must be punished. You sent people to hunt me just to force me to marry you. I can't forgive you. The girl's sad eyes were suddenly filled with fear, and she couldn't help but back up a few steps. What are you going to do? Of course to, Ji Judian laughed presumptuously, ruin you. The girl shivered and tried to run away, but there seemed to be a boulder on her body and she couldn't move. Let me tell you, I never have a tender heart for women, especially women who covet something that doesn't belong to them. Ji Judian coldly glanced at her, pinched her chin with his fingers, and his voice was bloodthirsty. I wonder if you will still dare behave like this after I destroy your face. Ah. When the woman tried to beg for his mercy, she felt a pain on her cheek and blood trickled down her white skin. It was so painful that she almost burst into tears. She screamed in panic, Ji Judian, what did I do wrong? Is it wrong to fall in love with you? If you hadn't refused to marry me, I wouldn't have sent people to hunt you. However, she didn't expect that Ji Judian was so powerful. The man next to him was also unfathomable and powerful. The girl bit her lips. When she first saw the man Ji Judian called Ghost Emperor, she couldn't help but be attracted by him. But she fell in love with Ji Judian first, so she only wanted Ji Judian. However, she was high-bred and beautiful. Ji Judian didn't like her because she happened not to be his type. But it didn't mean that no man would love her. Even if she loved Ji Judian deeply, she had to charm this man into saving her. This, young master, the girl bit her lip tightly, turned her head and looked at Yun Xiao, please, let Ji Judian release me. I don't want to die or be disfigured. As long as you let me go, I'm willing to give you everything I have. However, Yun Xiao didn't even glance at her, as if she didn't exist. What? You can't seduce me, so you want to try someone else? Ji Judian gave a grim smile. The girl was surprised. Ji Judian was not happy because she was talking to another man. Was it because he loved her? He was angry just because she pushed him too hard. It must be like this. At the thought of this, the girl was gleeful and hurriedly defended herself. Judian, I only like you. I begged him just because I wanted to survive. Don't get me wrong. Before she could finish, Ji Judian suddenly pinched her chin forcibly. It hurt so much that the girl cried and her eyes were full of grievances. If you want to seduce a man, you should find the right one. Who do you think you are? Will Ghost Emperor put aside my little Fenger and choose you? Judian's eyes were full of killing intent. He was even angrier when he saw the girl trying to seduce Yun Xiao. He would never allow anyone to undermine Yun Luo Feng's happiness. Even though he knew Yun Xiao would not be tempted. Yun Xiao frowned as he heard Ji Judian called Yun Luo Feng, my little Fenger, but his eyebrows loosened when he heard his last word. Chapter 1868. Smug 1. Judian. If you really need a man, I don't mind helping you. The killing intent in Judian's eyes grew more intense. He couldn't bear this woman anymore. Besides, do you really think I am afraid of your father? I went to visit him because I wanted to cooperate with him. But it seems that I shouldn't spare your life just for the sake of your father. As Judian relaxed his hands, the girl collapsed to the ground. Her face was filled with despair and pain, and she seemed to know that Judian would never love her. However, as she thought of the woman that Judian called Little Feng, her heart was filled with jealousy. Why could that woman, having an excellent man's love, still gain the love of another one? That was unfair. Judian should love her. That woman stole everything from her. Xiao didn't look at the girl, but he sensitively felt her resentment. His face immediately turned cold. This woman wouldn't hate Judian or him. Then the one she hated must be Feng. You're making trouble for Feng. Xiao's voice was so cold that no one could feel any emotion from it. Figuring out what he meant, Judian gave a nonchalant smile. I wanted to spare her life, but now I think she will cause trouble if I let her go. Women were trouble. Except, of course, his little Feng. No. She opened her mouth in panic. Just when she tried to ask for mercy, she felt a hand grip her neck. As the hand suddenly exerted strength, her body softened and fell to the ground. She died. The very second before her death, the girl was still wondering why Judian killed her so ruthlessly since she just showed a touch of resentment but did nothing. He said he would spare her life. Judian took out a handkerchief, wiped his hands, and discarded it on the ground. Then he turned his beautiful and wicked eyes to Xiao. Let's look for her separately. Since Luo Feng was here, they had to find her anyway. Okay. Xiao's voice was as cold as ever. Then, before Judian answered him, his hawk-like figure quickly shot into the distance and disappeared without a trace. Judian coldly stared at the girl's body, and gave a grim smile. I did want to spare your life, but I accidentally mentioned Little Feng. Your Jian family is the most powerful family of the Tianqi kingdom, and I don't know whether Feng can cope with you with her current strength, so I have to kill you in case you will make trouble for her. As for the Jian family, Judian squinted, if they can't make the right choice, I don't mind wiping them out. The Tianqi kingdom. The Jian family. A man was sitting cross-legged in the room with his eyes closed when he suddenly opened his eyes. His face was a bit pale, and a drop of cold sweat trickled down his forehead. He called out, Elder 5. Then, an old figure appeared out of nowhere. The old man stood in front of the middle-aged man and respectfully made an obeisance. Master, what can I do for you? Tell me honestly what happened to Tian'er. Chapter 1869. Smug 2. Elder 5 paused and a touch of surprise flickered across her face. Master, the eldest miss. Tell me honestly, what on earth is she busy doing? The middle-aged man scowled and gnashed his teeth. Seeing that he had known about it, Elder 5 said helplessly, young Master Ji wasn't willing to marry the eldest miss and left with an excuse. Eldest miss was unwilling to accept it and took people to hunt him down. Stupid. The middle-aged man angrily pounded on the table, looking furious. Master, is there something wrong with the eldest miss? Noticing the middle-aged man's expression, Elder 5 paused and asked anxiously. The middle-aged man shuddered and closed his eyes. After quite a while, he opened his eyes. The members of the Jian family have telepathy with each other, but just now, I felt the telepathy between her and me disappear, which means she is dead. What? Elder 5 was stunned. Every member of the Jian family was born with telepathy with the other family members. Only the people of the Jian family knew about this and it was unknown to outsiders. Since Master said the eldest miss was dead, then she must have died. Thinking of this, Elder 5 was so regretful. He shouldn't have let the eldest miss go to hunt down Judian and should have tried his best to stop her. Master, are you going to chase after Judian? Chase after him? The middle-aged man sneered. To be honest, I don't know the real strength of Judian. Even if he isn't powerful, his potential is infinite. I can afford to lose a daughter but I can't afford to lose the whole Jian family. What are you going to do, Master? Uncle Five thought for a while and asked. The middle-aged man's eyes twinkled. Tian'er had a fierce temper. No wonder Ji Judian didn't like her. Then, let Annur marry him. The third miss. Elder Five was surprised, but the third miss was born to your concubine. Will Ji Judian marry a girl born to a concubine? On the continent of Wind and Cloud, people didn't care much about descent, but only considered it when distributing family property to children. However, Elder Five didn't think Ji Judian would marry a girl born to a concubine. Except for Tian'er, only my second daughter Year was born to my wife. But she has to marry the second prince, so it can't be her. Now, only Annur is available. Annur is a quiet and gentle girl, and Ji Judian will definitely like her. A cunning gleam flickered across his eyes. Besides the imperial family, he also wanted to rope in outstanding young spirit cultivators. If these people could be used by him, he didn't mind sacrificing his daughters. After all, he just took his daughters as tools. Unfortunately, Jianan was born to a concubine and he didn't like her much, so at the very beginning, he didn't think of her. But now he had no other choice. He would use any daughter he could use. Fortunately, the middle-aged man hadn't seen Yun Xiao, or else he would also scheme to marry a daughter to him. Elder Five, in the whole Tianqi kingdom, my daughters are the most beautiful women. These beautiful daughters are powerful weapons for me. Even heroes fall for beauties. No man can escape the temptation of beautiful women, and only the most outstanding men in the world are worthy of my daughters. The middle-aged man laughed and looked not quite sad about the death of his eldest daughter. Even though he was sad at the time he felt it, he was sad that he lost a bargaining chip instead of mourning for his daughter. Elder Five gave a wry smile. He had a feeling that Ji Judian wouldn't accept the third miss. Chapter 1870, Frame Up 1. The Luo Feng Kingdom, the princess's estate. Time flew. Over the last 3 days the princess's estate was very quiet, and even consort Qin, who never stopped vexing Mu Shuexin, didn't bother her. However, the peace was broken 3 days later. A crowd of people appeared at the gate of the princess's estate. The crowd, led by consort Qin, entered the estate in such a rush that the princess's estate people couldn't stop them at all. What's the matter? Mu Shuexin heard the noise outside and walked out of the estate. She couldn't help but frown when the first person she saw was the grim-faced consort Qin. Mu Shuexin, how dare you? Consort Qin gave out an angry howl that made Mu Shuexin's eardrums ache. She rubbed her aching ears and looked quite dissatisfied. Are you here to disturb my father? Consort Qin looked extremely sad and pointed her slender fingers at Mu Shuexin. How dare you mention His Majesty? During this period, I had someone monitor your princess's estate. Why didn't you tell us His Majesty had died? Are you trying to conceal something? Mu Shuexin scowled. Consort Qin, without any evidence, how can you accuse me like this? Aren't you afraid of eating your own bitter fruit? In fact, Mu Shuexin knew Consort Qin's intention the very moment she appeared. However, when she thought of what Yun Luo Feng told her, a killing intent appeared in her chilly eyes. Princess, stop quibbling. Consort Qin looked extremely sad. Imperial physician, you told me you took some dream-returning grass from the pharmacy. What were you going to do with it? If you didn't murder His Majesty, why don't you let us see him? I told you, father just fell asleep and no one is allowed to disturb him. Mu Shuexin straightened up and blocked Consort Qin's way. She raised her chin obstinately, with a touch of coldness in her eyes. At first, the ministers didn't believe what Consort Qin said, but now seeing Mu Shuexin preventing them from entering the room, they couldn't help but suspect that the emperor had died. The ministers immediately panicked. If His Majesty did die, the Luo Feng kingdom would be in a state of turmoil. Princess, an old minister stepped forward. I believe you're innocent, but please let us see His Majesty. Mu Shuexin frowned. Miss Yun said father would wake up today, but it took time. Before he woke up, he couldn't be disturbed. I said no one was allowed in. Muk Jexin shouted. When father wakes up, I'll let you see him. Wake up. Consort Qin sneered in her heart. The emperor will never wake up. It seems princess is trying to conceal something. You don't dare to let us see His Majesty because you're afraid we will find out you poisoned him, right? Consort Qin began to sob. His Majesty loved you so much. How could you murder him? Princess, get out of the way. If His Majesty is fine, why don't you let us see him? General Li sneered and went up to push Mu Shuexin aside. Just then the two god-level puppets that were secretly protecting Mu Shuexin fell from the sky, landed on the ground with a thud, and blocked his way with their massive bodies. Mu Shuexin was stunned. These two people looked quite powerful. But she was sure she didn't know them. They are. General Li was stunned, and then he suddenly thought of something and hurriedly withdrew his hand. They are god-level puppets from the spirit-gathering pharmacy. Chapter 1871. Frame Up 2. Puppets. Qi Su. Mu Shuexin had heard about what happened in the spirit-gathering pharmacy. When she heard they were the puppets of the spirit-gathering pharmacy, warmth welled up within her. She soon calmed down, and her cold voice resounded throughout the yard, with a murderous air, anyone who dares to take one more step forward will be killed. The two guards, who had been ordered to protect Mu Shuexin, went forward at her command and stared coldly at the group of people. Consort Qin was a bit chagrined. She really underestimated the girl and didn't know that she had borrowed the puppets from Qi Su. She seemed to be aware of what she was going to do. Unfortunately, she didn't take Mu Shuexin seriously, so she didn't bring the strong masters of the imperial family with her. Mu Shuexin, you murdered His Majesty. You should be sentenced to death. Consort Qin rolled her eyes and shouted coldly, don't you think you can survive with the protection of these puppets? Don't forget that the imperial family has a lot of strong masters. Do you think these puppets can protect you? I advise you to confess your guilt in case someone else is involved. By someone else, she was referring to Qi Su. She was very clear about Mu Shuexin's feelings for Qi Su. To protect Qi Su, she would definitely plead guilty. However, in the face of her threat, Mu Shuexin just sneered. You say I murdered my father. Where is the evidence? That's just your one-sided statement. I think you wanted to murder my father and you are trying to make me your scapegoat. Nonsense. Consort Qin was outraged. I love His Majesty so much. How could I murder him? My son, unlike you, also avidly loves his father. Only you would murder him. Mu Shuexin gave her a contemptuous smile. Then why are you so sure father is dead? Well, Consort Qin sneered, I was worried about His Majesty, so I sent someone to check only to find that His Majesty had died. Mu Shuexin tilted her head sideways. May I ask Consort Qin why I wanted to murder father? How would I know? You don't need a reason to murder. Consort Qin looked extremely indignant as if Mu Shuexin had really murdered the emperor. Looking at her brazen face, Mu Shuexin smiled but her heart was filled with murderous desire. The Grand Preceptor frowned. There was anger in his eyes. He suppressed the anger in his heart and said, Princess, if you think you're innocent, just open the door. If His Majesty is alive, we'll leave. Consort Qin gave a triumphant smile. The emperor was already dead, and Mu Shuexin was destined to be buried with him. No matter how hard she tried to stop them, she couldn't get away with it. However, just as Consort Qin was gloating, a low, magnetic sound came from the room. Let them in. Consort Qin's face immediately stiffened, her pupils dilated, and she almost thought she was hearing things. Was that the emperor's voice? That was impossible. Even if he didn't die, he wouldn't be able to wake up. At the same time, the ministers present all heard the voice. Among them, some were glad to hear it, some couldn't believe it. And some panicked. It's His Majesty. It's His Majesty's voice. Did I hear it right? His Majesty really woke up. With the crowd was in an uproar, Mu Shuexin had taken the lead to push the door open and at first glance saw the man on the bed with his eyes open. At this moment, Mu Shuexin choked up. After suffering for a year she was finally relieved. Chapter 1872. Frame Up 3. Father. Mu Zhenchen looked at her as lovingly as ever, with his eyes full of affection for her. Looking at him, she felt she was in a dream. Shuexin, I'm sorry I let you be wronged. Mu Shuexin couldn't control her emotion anymore, rushed into Mu Zhenchen's arms and burst into tears. Father, you woke up. That's great. You finally woke up. I thought I would never see you again. She really should thank Yun Luo Feng. Had it not been for Yun Luo Feng, she and father would surely have only met in heaven. She saved both father and her. Consort Qin stood stiffly at the door with cold sweat all over her. Her feet could hardly move, as if they were rooted to the ground. Consort Qin, didn't you claim His Majesty had died? And you said he was murdered by the princess. But His Majesty is alive. How can you explain it? A loyal minister snapped, looking quite angry. Consort Qin's face was pale and her lips trembled slightly. She had planned each step, but she never expected that His Majesty would wake up. It was all over. This time, she was finished. Hearing the minister's words, Mu Zhenchen glared at Consort Qin. Consort Qin, can you explain to me what happened? When I was sick, you bullied my baby girl. Your Majesty, quote. Plop. Consort Qin fell to her knees with her face full of tears and she looked so sad and pitiful. I didn't mean it. Someone used me to frame the princess. I'm innocent. After saying this, she looked at Mu Xuexin. Your Highness, I was deceived by someone. Please forgive me. Was she begging for her mercy? Mu Xuexin sneered. Wasn't it too late? Consort Qin, you said you were wronged, but you tried to give me to Qimo as his concubine. Bang. Hearing Mu Xuexin's words, Mu Zhenchen flew into a fury and pounded his clenched fist against the bed. Since he hadn't yet fully recovered, his fist didn't have much strength, but it still scared everyone in the room, who gasped in horror. It seems that a lot of things happened when I was sick. So my baby girl is only worthy of being a concubine. As he said the last word, Consort Qin felt a murderous aura released from him, which made her legs limp and she almost fell to the ground. Your Majesty, I didn't make that decision. Somebody must have framed me. And, Mu Xuexin sneered, you falsely accused me in front of the ministers that I had fallen in love with Qimo when father was dying and claimed that I begged you to allow me to marry him. Why did you think I would love a man like Qimo? There was a cold sweat on Consort Qin's forehead. She almost collapsed to the ground and even her eyes turned glassy. Mu Zhenchen clenched his fists, the blue veins in his forehead were strongly pulsing and he wanted to strangle the woman alive. Xuexin is engaged to Qi Su. Do you think Qi Su is not as good as Qimo? Would she abandon Qi Su and choose Qimo? Were the ministers stupid or were you stupid? Hearing his words, the ministers all kept silent. His Majesty meant they were stupid. They really shouldn't have believed Consort Qin's absurd words. Your Majesty, quote. Chapter 1873, Frame Up 4. Consort Qin tried to defend herself but was interrupted by Mu Xuexin again. When father was seriously ill, you forced me to go to Lingchuan Mountain to search for medicine without sending the strong masters of the imperial family to protect me. Fortunately, I met Miss Yun, and she saved my life. Otherwise, I would have died on Lingchuan Mountain. Mu Zhenchen looked even angrier. He didn't expect that his daughter had almost died on Lingchuan Mountain. Lingchuan Mountain was such a dangerous place. There were numerous powerful spirit beasts in it. Without strong masters protecting her, how could she leave there safe and sound? Consort Qin was just trying to hound his daughter to death. However, Mu Zhenchen was interested in Miss Yun, whom Mu Xuexin mentioned, and was very grateful for her help. Without her help, he would be separated from his daughter forever even if he woke up. And, as if not seeing the increasingly paler face of Consort Qin, Mu Xuexin continued, the medicinal plant you said was on Lingchuan Mountain doesn't grow there. When I came back without it, you framed me as a coward who didn't dare to go to Lingchuan Mountain, and called me an ungrateful daughter. Mu Zhenchen gasped hard. His heart ached as if it had been torn. How much had his daughter suffered these days? If she hadn't been strong enough, she would not have been able to hold on. Consort Qin, you have really let me down. Mu Zhenchen slowly closed his eyes. After a long time, he suddenly opened his eyes and killing intent flickered across his eyes. Guards, take Consort Qin away and make her reflect on her misdeeds until she realizes that she was wrong. Why did His Majesty, who looked so angry, just order her to reflect on her misdeeds instead of punishing her? Some ministers who knew Mu Zhenchen well were not shocked but felt chilly, knowing His Majesty must have a reason not to kill Consort Qin. Consort Qin didn't think about this. She thought she would be executed. To her surprise, she just needed to reflect on her misdeeds and wasn't even imprisoned. This was really a surprise. Did His Majesty really love her? So he forgave her. You can leave now. I'll stay in the princess's estate for some time. Mu Zhenchen waved his hand and closed his eyes. He was afraid he wouldn't be able to keep from killing Consort Qin right now. Soon, all the ministers retreated, leaving only Mu Zhenchen and Mu Shuexin in the room. Father, Mu Shuexin curled her lips, Consort Qin harbors ill intentions. You were poisoned by her. She almost killed you. If it weren't for Miss Yun, you would have already died. Hearing this, Mu Zhenchen became more curious about Yun Luo Feng. It seems that I really should thank Miss Yun. When I'm free, I'll visit her and thank her in person. Mu Shuexin was unhappy. Father, you know Consort Qin has done so many evil things. Why did you still let her off? Shuexin, Mu Zhenchen sighed helplessly, it was because I want to know who Mu Ran's father is. Mu Ran was the son of Consort Qin and the only prince. Mu Shuexin was stunned. What did father mean? As a matter of fact, before I became ill, I learned that I had become infertile due to constant overwork. But that doesn't mean that Mu Ran is not your son. Maybe you were able to make Consort Qin pregnant before you became ill. So, Mu Zhenchen gave a faint smile, I sent someone to secretly take his blood sample and make a blood test with it. It turned out that he is not my son. But I was sick in bed before I had a chance to check it out. Do you think I'll let her off after she cheated on me? Chapter 1874. Get down on your knees 1. He didn't punish Consort Qin now just because he wanted to find out who committed adultery with her. Father, I think you can pretend you are going to execute Consort Qin. Perhaps that man will expose himself when he sees Consort Qin in danger. Mu Shuexin's eyes sparkled and her voice was very soft and melodious. It's risky. If the man is mortally afraid of death, he won't come out even if Consort Qin is in danger. Mu Zhenchen's eyes were cold. At that time, he must have run away. You must keep it a secret and never leak it. When the man shows up, I'll torture them to death. If she only cheated on him, he might be able to forgive her. What he couldn't tolerate was what Consort Qin had done to his daughter over the last year. Mu Zhenchen sighed when he thought of the result of the blood test. No wonder he never liked his son. It turned out there was no blood tie between them, so he wouldn't like him anyway. Shuexin, on the other hand, was everything to him. But, a fierce light flashed through Mu Zhenchen's eyes, though I won't punish Consort Qin openly, I can secretly do something to her. Shuexin, you can rest assured. Father will avenge you. At night, the moon was as cool as water. Consort Qin lay triumphantly on a chaise lounge, her face beaming with a smile. I made so many horrible mistakes, but His Majesty still forgave me. I must be very important in his heart. I'll solve that bitch sooner or later. She picked up the teacup in front of her and was about to take a sip when a loud noise was suddenly heard and her quilt slipped out of her hand. Who is it? Bang. The next minute, the door was kicked open and a group of men in black rushed in, brutally kicking and beating Consort Qin. Who are you? How dare you? I will never let you off. Ah. The sharp pain made Consort Qin scream and she sounded very angry. Did that bitch Mu Shuexin send you here? Tell her to wait and see. I will make her die without a burial place. As she said this, her voice turned hoarse, and she uttered a cry of pain. Outside the room, the little prince watched in horror as this group of men was beating up his mother. Then he ran away without looking back, for fear that they would beat him too. Consort Qin would never expect that her son was so cowardly that he left her behind in order not to get involved. Maybe she would feel sad if she saw the little prince turn around and run away. Of course, what happened to Consort Qin was unknown to Qi Zheng and Qi Mo in the Qi family. They were having a hard time these days. Qi Su hated his guts and didn't accept him as his father, so he often beat him up with some excuse. As Qi Su was protected by Yun Yi, Qi Zheng couldn't do anything to protect himself. He tried to resist, but was soon knocked out by Yun Yi. Now he only hoped Consort Qin could find out about his suffering and come to save him. Unfortunately, Consort Qin was badly injured and lay in bed for 3 months before getting out of bed. During those 3 months, instead of being beaten up, she was raped by a different man every day. Chapter 1875. Get down on your knees 2. She tried to complain to the emperor, but he didn't believe that Mu Shuexin would do that to her. To her horror, she shouted so loudly that night, but no one heard her, as if no one was around. It must be Mu Shuexin. After the emperor woke up, she regained her power. Only she could do such a thing. However, what was even scarier to Consort Qin still awaited her. The inhumane treatment over the 3 months made her pregnant. She panicked but didn't dare to tell anyone for fear that the emperor would find out. After all, the emperor hadn't touched her for 3 months. If she was found to be pregnant, she would lose the emperor's favor and even be killed. At the thought of this, Consort Qin bit her lips and ordered, "Guards, prepare for me. I'm going out to see my brother." It was unrealistic to have an abortion in the imperial palace, so she had to go to the Qi family to solve this child. "Yes, Consort Qin." An imperial maid responded and left to prepare the sedan for her. The Qi family. As a eunuch called, "Here comes Her Highness," the servants fell to their knees in a row at the gate. She slowly stepped down from the sedan and went to the door of the Qi family. "Why is my brother not here to greet me?" Consort Qin raised her eyebrow and looked rather dissatisfied. If it were in the past, Qi Zheng and Qi Mo would have been waiting for her at the gate. Why hadn't they come here? "Consort Qin, who do you think you are? Stop putting on airs in our Qi family." A cold voice came from behind the servants, causing Consort Qin to scowl, and she looked coldly at the several people coming from there. 3 people came over slowly. 2 of them were Qi Su and Qi Ling, and the third was young Luo Feng. She immediately clenched her fists and her nails went deep into her flesh. That person's face was so beautiful that it had made her jealous for years. Even though she knew it was not Yun Yueching standing there, she couldn't help being jealous. And this face was even more beautiful than Yun Yueching's, and younger. "Qi Su," Consort Qin snorted, turned her eyes to Qi Su and asked coldly, "Why are you here?" Qi Su sneered, "This is my home. Where should I be if not here?" "Nonsense," Consort Qin huffed, "who says this is your home? This is my Qi family. Who are you? You aren't allowed to step over the threshold of my family." A person who had been expelled wouldn't be allowed to enter the Qi family. Qi Su gave a mocking smile. "Consort Qin, you seem to forget that you have married out of the family. I, Qi Su, am the young master of the Qi family. How can you say it's not my home? As for you, I think the one who should fuck off is you. How dare you?" Hearing Qi Su's words, a eunuch shouted out loud and the guards at the side all pulled out their weapons and pointed them at Qi Su. "Qi Su," Consort Qin pompously marched to Qi Su, "I am His Majesty's wife, while you are merely a commoner. You should get down on your knees in front of me. How dare you be so rude to me?" Qi Su smiled. "When Master was still around, His Majesty allowed me not to kneel down to him. If I don't even need to kneel down to His Majesty, why should I kneel down to you?" Consort Qin's face changed. She forgot about that just now. She gnashed her teeth at the thought and turned her eyes to Yun Luofeng in anger. "Why don't you kneel down to me?" The emperor had allowed Qi Su and Qi Ling not to kneel down to the imperial family members, but this woman was just a commoner. Even if she forced her to kneel down to her, no one would dare to say anything.